Tonight, 2 women killed every week by their partners.
Whatever he was going to do, he was going to kill her because he was not going to lose her. Unless they could put him in prison, he was not going to be stopped doing what he was going to do.
Can a new law get help to victims before it's too late?
Coercive control isn't a type of domestic abuse, it is the dark heart of domestic abuse.
We follow the police on the front line.
What am I getting arrested for?
As I explained in the House, it's new legislation that's brought out for domestic violence.
I wasn't being violent though.
You don't have to be violent.
It's Friday night in Darlington.
Just heading up to where domestic, one of the neighbours who said he can hear raised voices, slamming doors and things like that.
In fact, police across the country answer 100 domestic calls every hour.
We're going to go up there and see what the situation is.
1 in 10 recorded crimes in this country is domestic abuse. 33% of all assault with injury. But these statistics hide the true figures.
All right. I'm not putting hands on, but just keep the noise down, all right? Do you want to come in here and tell us what's happened?
Now a new law aims to transform our understanding of domestic abuse, for the first time recognising the issue of coercive control.
Coercive control can be defined as a course of oppressive conduct designed to subordinate partners by making them afraid, hurting them, and depriving them of basic rights and resources.
Domestic abuse and coercive control affect men and women in all types of intimate relationships from all backgrounds, but it is still an overwhelmingly male-on-female crime. Hollie Gazzard was one of the 100 women who are killed by partners every year. She was murdered 2 years ago today.
Hollie was bright, she was bubbly. She had a massive smile, and when she went into a room, she lit the room up.
19-year-old hairdresser Hollie began seeing Asha Maslin in February 2013. Right from the start, the family had misgivings about their daughter's new boyfriend, soon confirmed by a scene at a family party.
He was drunk. And he was very abusive towards the staff as soon as he got into the restaurant. He was a bit humiliating towards Hollie and really put her down, and Hollie was in tears throughout that meal. And that was the first time we thought, our instincts are right here.
Over the next few months, it became ever clearer something wasn't right, but the family had no idea about the extent of abuse and control.
Hollie never had a bruise on her. So it was generally the financial and emotional abuse for Hollie, but that's not necessarily something that she would feed back to us. So we didn't know really what was going on behind closed doors. I remember Hollie waking up to, I think it was 60 missed calls she had once towards the end when she was trying to get away from him. We tried to protect her as much as we could, but with Hollie, if you did too much of that, we would have pushed her away.
The control and violence escalated as Hollie tried again and again to separate from Maslin. When she broke it off for the last time in February 2014, Maslin then stole her bank card and £300 from her. Hollie contacted the police.
She told them that at that stage, he was threatening towards her, he was threatening to throw acid in her face, he was threatening to beat her up, but they seemed to be more interested in the theft of her money rather than the abuse that she was getting and the problems that she was getting with him in terms of the threats.
Just a few days later, Asha Maslin attacked Hollie in the salon where she worked. He stabbed her 14 times.
I was going to leave the house. There were 2 plainclothes policemen walking down the drive. At that stage, I knew then what happened. She'd been killed.
That night will be the worst night of my life. We'd had a text message from him on that evening saying, I warned you all, it didn't have to be this way. And he had actually killed Hollie at this point.
police report into Hollie's death concluded that information about Maslin and the threat he posed to Hollie had been overlooked, as well as the opportunity to arrest him.
And this was a man who, it transpired, had form.
Absolutely, we found out now from the recent publications of the homicide report that he'd actually been arrested 23 times previously, and all of those incidents were increasing intensity. He had 2 previous partners that he had abused. One of them, he'd poured petrol through her letterbox. He was a high risk on the police database of abuse.
Asher Maslin is serving a life sentence for Hollie's murder.
He was never going to give up. Whatever he was going to do, he was going to kill her because he was not going to lose her. Unless they could put him in prison, he was not going to be stopped doing what he was going to do. I've lost my life because, my wife and my 2 daughters were my life. Now one of them is not there. I won't see her get married, have children. I've lost a person who I've really enjoyed being with. She was just a lovely person.
After Hollie's murder in 2014, the Police Inspectorate of Constabularies, or HMIC, released a damning report into the policing of domestic violence.
Forces across the country did treat our report as a wake-up call, and that's exactly as we intended it to be. The service was just not good enough. The police were not treating keeping victims of domestic abuse safe as a priority. They all said that they were, but actually when we went and looked, that wasn't happening in practice.
There were lots of failings around getting the basics wrong, so evidence gathering, the police officers' behaviour when they first attend an incident. This lack of understanding of the control dynamics at the heart of domestic abuse was a massive issue that came across in that report.
Since that report, a new law has been enacted which recognises that for many, domestic abuse doesn't necessarily begin and end with violence.
When I first met my ex-husband, he was very gushing and I felt quite bowled over.
Rachel's relationship started with a whirlwind romance, a mortgage and a pregnancy within a few months of meeting. But when she was made redundant, he made it difficult for her to return to work.
He would sabotage job interviews, he would mock what I was wearing to the interview. He would be difficult on the morning of the interview so that I didn't have time to have a shower or wash my hair, which knocks your confidence when you're being interviewed.
Without a job, she was increasingly isolated, and after her child was born, her husband made it difficult for her to socialise.
I was only able to get out twice during the first year that my child was born. And as I was putting on my makeup for the first time in months and looking forward to that, he became very emotionally sort of blackmailing. That he worked very hard, didn't I know, and that the only reason that I was able to afford to go out for these meals was because it was him and the lifestyle that he kept me accustomed to, and really needed to draw me into a lengthy conversation with him that would ultimately make me miss my taxi and the meal out.
He also began to control every aspect of her spending.
He would micromanage what I spent my money on. I paid for the food shopping and various bills which he didn't pay for, even though I wasn't working and he was, which meant that I was constantly getting into more and more debt, and the expectation was that I would do that because I had to pay my way.
Professor Evan Stark is one of the world's leading experts in the dynamics of coercively controlling relationships.
Many men, a very large proportion, are monitoring their partner's expenses, making them account on an expense-by-expense basis. So money is very critical, because without money and other basic resources, how are women supposed to escape or really stand up for themselves in a relationship?
While Rachel's husband's control in the years of the marriage was absolute, his use of violence was minimal.
I was controlled by sort of the expectation of how I should be, this role that I should be fulfilling. And by the end of the relationship, I couldn't even lift my eyes up for fear of looking at him in the wrong way, and that resulting in an explosive outburst.
The micromanagement element of coercive control involves the expectation that a female partner will obediently follow rules laid down either informally or explicitly about how women go about enacting their roles as mothers, their roles as wives, and their roles as women. How they dress, how they wear their hair, how they walk. No rule is too trivial for an abuser to assert his authority with. And tragically, the more trivial the rule, the more degraded women feel when they obey the rule.
I was just completely crumbling inside. My inner self was just completely eroding, and I didn't know what music I liked, I didn't know what type of clothes I liked, I couldn't remember what my favourite colour was, what my hobbies had been or were, so I felt suffocated and frightened.
The effect of being subjected to control and isolation over time can be devastating psychologically. But the major effect of coercive control can be a hostage-like situation of dependence, just as we would have with any other hostage.
But after a few years, Rachel's husband became more volatile and violent, and it was the risk he posed to their children that finally galvanised Rachel to break free.
I don't think my perception of abusive men ever connected to me. I never thought that that was the case. I never felt that he was a stereotypical abuser or that I was in an abusive relationship.
So the new law, which only applies to offences committed after the 29th of December 2015, broadens the definition of domestic abuse to include coercive and controlling relationships like Rachel's.
Women's Aid campaigned really hard for this law because women who'd experienced domestic abuse were telling us that they couldn't come forward and report it until they'd experienced physical violence, and also police officers were saying that they simply didn't have enough tools in their toolbox to deal with the reality of domestic abuse. Because you have to remember, coercive control isn't a type of domestic abuse, it is the dark heart of domestic abuse.
Violence is not the worst part of what these women are experiencing, but the deprivation of rights and freedoms. So this really represents a major cultural shift in how police and prosecutors and judges come to understand the experience of women in abusive relationships. And this will not be an easy transition.
Critics of the law fear hard evidence will be difficult to gather and convictions not easy to secure, which is why HMIC says it's vital all frontline officers get specialist training.
This is a complex, harmful, pernicious crime, and the fact that there may not be a physical injury, a bruise on the victim, is no excuse for not asking all of the questions and building the evidential picture and building the case in just the same way as any other crime.
Back in Darlington, the police are making an arrest.
She wasn't telling us much information at first, but then of course what she's then told us that it's been happening over a period of time. She's had to go to the doctor because she's suffering with depression, etc. And this is an ideal scenario for the new legislation, so he has been locked up under the new legislation.
What am I getting arrested for?
As I explained in the House, it's new legislation that's brought out for domestic violence. And it's
I wasn't being violent though.
You don't have to be violent. Every time that she makes a statement, he gets arrested, goes to court, and basically he's back out and he's harassing her again. What we have done on this occasion, though, we've used our body-worn cameras, so that will get her account of what's happened tonight and what's happened in the past. So hopefully we'll be able to use that as evidence without her giving a statement. So what will happen next is he'll be in the cells overnight, so it gives her a bit of peace of mind for the night anyway.
Changes in policing attitudes can make a real difference to victims and survivors, but so much of abuse is hidden. It can take months, even years, before victims seek help. On average, people in an abusive relationship are assaulted 35 times before they even contact the police. So how can help be delivered to them quicker? Marianne works for the Peabody Housing Trust, which is responsible for more than 25,000 homes. The trust believes that housing providers are perfectly placed to be the eyes and ears in the fight against domestic abuse. Over the last 8 years, they've rolled out training in domestic abuse awareness to all their staff. So what sort of situations would Peabody staff be looking out for? What sort of things have they seen?
It's not necessarily just the obvious signs of somebody looking physically abused. It can be the subtle signs, bathroom door locks that are busted, punch marks in walls, noticing when somebody is not necessarily giving you eye contact, intimidated, or not necessarily even talking to you directly, but saying that you have to speak to their partner or their husband. It's those kind of things that we have learnt through the training that could be indicators. I'm not saying it definitely is going to be an indicator, but it can be indicators that there is domestic abuse.
Hannah had been in an abusive relationship on and off for nearly a decade when a chance visit from a housing officer gave her the support she needed to free herself.
I had a housing officer come round and I just broke down. Just seeing another adult that wasn't so close, and it all just came out. And it was from her that she said, I can actually put you in touch with people and we can actually help you. I got given a security housing officer. She was my absolute angel. She gave me enough courage to go to the police. Then the police got me in touch with domestic violence. I managed to go to court. We got protection put in place and they helped me with the move. They got me somewhere where nobody would have known where I'd moved to, somewhere safe, and it was all down to them.
Using an executive order, Hannah was moved to a new location where her abuser couldn't find her.
I felt 10 stone lighter. It's hard to explain how free you feel as an adult to not have that burden and that sick feeling and that constant fear just be removed overnight.
In the past 8 years since we've been doing this training within Peabody, disclosure has increased by 1,400%. I mean, I think that's phenomenal, and that's simply because we know what to look out for. We are better trained, we're better skilled.
Improving intervention is key, but in the long term, education is one answer to prevention.
Young people's tolerance of things like boyfriends monitoring their phone calls or telling them what to wear or telling them where they can go and who they can see. And what we've found is that the tolerance of that kind of behaviour among young people is very high, and that really needs to change.
Every minute you're in this room, the police are going to a call. Every 60 seconds.
In this secondary school in Barry, they're passionate about educating young people of all ages about healthy relationships.
What types of things do people do or say in a relationship to emotionally abuse their partner?
They say it in a bit of a joke way.
Well done. They will pick on anything that you're insecure about. Maybe calling you fat, stupid, ugly. Look at the state of you. Why am I even with you? Is that okay? Is that healthy? It's really important we get in here to teach young children about what healthy relationships are. And I'm talking about, you know, the low-level stuff, about being respectful, about negotiating, about having a conversation, about listening to somebody else, rather than using all the abusive tactics that people use to get their own way. A lot of this is learned behaviour. If children living in homes where this is not taught, then the only place they can learn it is in the school environment, or how to be respectful and supportive of other people and know what they're doing is not okay. You might be going out, girls, in a really short skirt, showing a bit of cleavage. You look lush, you look stunning, it's fine. And your partner says, you ain't wearing that. I'm not having all those boys looking at you. Get in and change. Put a pole neck and leggings on. Is that controlling? Is that abusive?
Before this class, I didn't really have any knowledge about domestic abuse, but now I kind of do know, and for the future ahead, I'm kind of prepared.
I thought it was quite interesting how we use power and control in everyday lives and how we're actually abusive without knowing.
The fact that someone gets abused every 6 seconds really hit me. I thought, wow, that's crazy. This needs to stop because it's so serious.
So these are little signs we need to look out for.
It's all about awareness, it's all about education, and we do a lot of work in schools now with teenagers to try and show them what is a healthy relationship, show them what they should get in terms of respect from a partner. So we're trying to give them the indicators to pick up on, to say, this relationship is going down the wrong route, so you need to do something about it.
There might be a dad watching this that's worried about their daughter. Might be the same age as Hollie, I suppose. If you had a message for that dad who might be watching this, or for a mum or a sister, what would it be?
Look out for the signs, talk to your daughter or your son about it. If you want to seek professional advice, go to one of the support services that are in every county, because they will give you that advice. But don't ignore it, take them under your wing, because ultimately at the end of the day you need to keep them safe.